In this lecture, we're going to add a feature for detecting an empty path. If you're on a team, it's considered good practice to provide warning messages for your team members. If an enemy does not have a spline, they won't be able to patrol around the map. You may forget to add a spline when designing your game. It can be helpful to add messages to remind you to add a spline. Let's try creating a custom message. In Visual Studio Code, open the Patrol component. At the top of the awake method, add a conditional statement with the following condition: spline game object equals null. This condition will check for an empty value on the spline game object variable. If the variable is empty, the user has not added a spline. Thus, the enemy cannot patrol the map. Inside this condition, run the debug.log warning method. We're using the log warning method to inform the user of a potential problem. Typically, we would use the log method, but this problem is urgent. Using the appropriate methods will help users understand the severity of the problem. Let's pass in the following message: X does not have a spline. I'm adding a placeholder called X. This placeholder should be replaced with the object's name. Our game has multiple enemies. Without the object's name, our team members may not know which enemy is missing a path. There are different ways to insert a dynamic value from within a string. C# supports a feature called string interpolation. String interpolation is the process of replacing a placeholder with a value. By default, strings can't be interpolated. To support interpolation, we must add a $ symbol at the beginning of the string. Next, replace the X placeholder with a pair of curly brackets. Inside these brackets, add a variable called name. This syntax may seem bizarre. The curly brackets allow us to insert a value into the string. In this case, we're inserting a variable called name, which does not exist within our class. This variable is defined by the monoBehavior class. It contains the name of the game object from the scene. By inheriting from the monoBehavior class, we have access to this information. Let's try testing our work. Switch over to Unity. I'm going to drag and drop another patrolling guard into the scene. Their location does not matter. Lastly, I'll play the game without adding a spline to this enemy. Moments after the game has started, a message gets logged into the console. The message tells us that we forgot to add a spline. By adding a simple check, we can avoid forgetting to put a spline onto a game object. Our teammates won't be confused when an enemy doesn't move. The console should provide them with all the info they'll need. This step is completely optional. However, it can be beneficial for your team. I always recommend trying to help your teammates whenever possible. Before moving on, I'm going to remove the enemy added to the scene. Adding them was for demonstration purposes. In the next lecture, let's start working on a patrol state for the enemy.